The words came out of my husband's mouth in flawless Japanese. He wasn't speaking to me, he was speaking about me, calling me beautiful and stupid, saying I was nothing more than a decoration on his arm, a polished accessory he brought to dinners to look successful. I kept my smile soft. I lifted my wine glass with steady hands. What he didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that I understood every single word, and that dinner was not going to end the way he thought it would. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. We were seated in a private dining room high above the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, soft golden light, a place where deals were whispered, not shouted. Across from us sat Mr. Tanaka, quiet, observant, powerful, a man whose company could decide the future of my husband's empire. My husband believed this dinner was about business, but beneath the linen tablecloth, beneath the polite smiles, something else was unfolding. Why would a man humiliate his wife in a language he thought she didn't understand? Why did Mr. Tanaka's eyes never leave me? And why did I choose to speak when I did? Stay with me. Because what happened next didn't just change a business deal, it changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my choices, and what happens when silence finally breaks. This is the story of Isabella Chen, a woman who spent 5 years being invisible, and one evening that forced her to decide whether revealing herself would free her or destroy everything she'd built. Before I became the billionaire's wife, I was simply Isabella. Quiet, observant, the kind of woman people underestimated because she didn't rush to fill silence. I grew up in San Francisco, the daughter of a literature professor and a music teacher. My childhood home smelled like old books and coffee. My mother practiced piano in the mornings. My father graded papers at the kitchen table in the evenings. They weren't wealthy, but they were intellectually rich. They believed education was protection, not for status, for substance. That understanding people, cultures, languages gave you perspective others lacked. My father would say, "Isabella, when you understand how someone thinks, you understand how to connect with them. Language isn't just words, it's worldview." So I studied. Not because I was forced, but because I was curious. I wanted to understand how different cultures organized thought, how meaning could shift with a single particle, how respect and hierarchy were built into grammar itself. I majored in linguistics at Berkeley. It wasn't a practical major. Everyone told me that. My aunt would ask what I planned to do with it. Teach? Translate? I didn't have an answer. I just knew I loved it. Japanese became my focus, not randomly. My roommate, sophomore year, was from Osaka. She'd speak to her family on the phone, and I'd sit there, fascinated by the sounds, the rhythm, the formality. She started teaching me basic phrases at first, then grammar, then cultural context. She'd explain that you couldn't just learn Japanese words, you had to understand the culture behind them. The concept of uchi and soto, inside and outside. The way Japanese people communicate differently depending on whether you're part of their group or not. The way silence can mean agreement, disagreement, or consideration depending on context. I was hooked. I took every Japanese class Berkeley offered, studied abroad in Tokyo my junior year, lived with a host family in a small suburb. They didn't speak English, I didn't speak Japanese well yet. The first month was terrifying. I'd sit at dinner trying to follow conversations, catching maybe every third word. But gradually something shifted. I stopped translating in my head, started thinking in Japanese, started understanding not just what people said, but what they meant. By the time I graduated, I was fluent, not conversational, fluent. I could read Murakami in the original, watch Ozu films without subtitles. understand business negotiations, political speeches, comedy, sarcasm, all of it. I loved that feeling of understanding a world most Americans couldn't access, of knowing that when I traveled to Japan, I wasn't a tourist, I was someone who could actually connect. After graduation, I worked odd jobs, tutored students, did some freelance translation, nothing glamorous. But I was 22 and I didn't need glamorous, I just needed interesting. I met Christopher at a gallery opening 3 years later. I was 25, he was 32. I'd gone with a friend who was into contemporary art. I wasn't particularly interested in the art. But the gallery was serving free wine and I was broke, so I went. Christopher was there with colleagues. He was wearing an expensive suit, standing in front of a painting that probably cost more than my rent. He looked like he belonged, like he was comfortable in spaces that made me feel like an imposter. I was about to leave when he turned and caught my eye, smiled, walked over. "What do you think of the exhibit?" he asked. I glanced at the painting. It was abstract, lots of red. "Honestly, I'm here for the wine," he laughed. "Same." We talked. He was easy to talk to, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested in my answers. He told me he ran a tech company, that he was expanding into international markets, that he was looking for someone who understood cultural communications, but didn't have anyone in mind yet. He asked for my number, not for work. Just for coffee. We had coffee, then dinner, then another dinner. Christopher was charming in that way. Successful men often are. He made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room, like your thoughts mattered, like he wanted to know you. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. It was perfect. Private dinner, beautiful ring, all the things you're supposed to want. I said yes because I loved him, because I believed we were partners, because he made me feel seen. The wedding was small. My parents came, his parents came, a few friends, nothing extravagant. We honeymooned in Japan. Christopher wanted to see Tokyo. I took him to places tourists don't go, small izakayas, traditional theatres. We walked through temple gardens in Kyoto. I translated for him, explained cultural contexts. He was fascinated. "You're like having a secret decoder," he said. "This country makes so much more sense when you explain it." I liked that, being useful, being valued. The first year of marriage was good. We were building something. Christopher's company was growing. I was freelancing, translating documents, teaching language classes online. We'd have dinner together most nights, talk about our days, make plans. Then his company got a major contract, a deal that required him to travel, to meet with investors, to network constantly. He started coming home later, traveling more, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. He stopped asking about my work, stopped remembering the names of my clients. When I tried to tell him about a particularly challenging translation project, he'd nod, but I could tell he wasn't listening. His focus was elsewhere, on his company, on his success, on the next deal. I told myself it was temporary, that this was just what happened when companies grew, that once things stabilized, we'd reconnect. But things never stabilized, they just accelerated. By year 3, I'd stopped taking on as many clients. Not because Christopher asked me to, but because he needed me more, to host dinners, to accompany him to events, to be available when he needed someone to talk to after a long day. I didn't mind at first. I liked supporting him, liked being part of his success, but somewhere along the way I stopped being a person to him. I became a function, someone who hosted dinners, who smiled at clients, who made sure his clothes were clean and his schedule was organized. I remember the exact moment I realized it. We were at a fundraiser. One of his investors was there with his wife. Christopher introduced us. "This is my wife, Isabella." Not, "This is Isabella. She's a translator. She's fluent in 4 languages. Just wife, like it was a job title, not a person. The investor's wife asked what I did. I started to answer. "I'm a translator. I specialize in—" "She's taking a break right now," Christopher interrupted, "focusing on other things." The conversation moved on, and I stood there, wine glass in hand, smiling, feeling like I'd just been erased. It kept happening, event after event, introduction after introduction. This is my wife. My wife handles that. My wife is great at hosting. Never my name without a qualifier. Never my work, never my skills, just wife. I tried to talk to him about it once. Christopher, when you introduce me, could you maybe mention what I do? I feel like people only see me as your wife. He looked confused. You are my wife. I thought you want me to say that. I do, but I'm also other things. Of course you are, but at business events, they don't need to know your whole resume. They just need to know you're with me. I didn't push it. Because what was I going to say? That it hurt to be reduced to a relationship? That I wanted to be seen as a person, not an extension of him? It seemed petty. Selfish even, so I stayed quiet. But I noticed that Christopher's colleagues spoke to me the way you speak to children, politely but dismissively. I noticed that at dinners they'd ask me about recipes and interior design, but never about work or ideas. I noticed that Christopher liked it that way. He liked being the smart one, the accomplished one, the one people listened to. And I realized something painful. He hadn't married me because he valued who I was. He'd married me because I fit the image of what a successful man's wife should be. Educated enough to be interesting. Attractive enough to be impressive. Quiet enough to not compete. I'd let it happen. I'd played the role because it was easier than confronting the truth. That the man I loved didn't actually see me. He saw a reflection of his own success. And that was enough for him. But here's what Christopher didn't know. I was still learning, still studying. While he focused on his career, I spent my mornings reading. Business journals, market analyses, articles about international trade. I wanted to understand his world, not because I wanted to compete, but because I wanted to connect with him. I thought if I understood what he cared about, we'd have more to talk about. I listened to his phone calls, not intentionally at first, but the house wasn't that big. He'd pace the living room talking to investors in Tokyo, Seoul, Shanghai, and I'd be in the kitchen making dinner, listening. Over time, I started understanding more than I probably should. Not just the language, but the business, the deals, the risks, and I realized Christopher was good at what he did. He was talented, persuasive, strategic. But he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. He made assumptions, big ones. He'd treat Japanese investors like they were Americans who just happened to speak a different language. He'd push for quick decisions in cultures that valued patience. He'd mistake politeness for agreement. And when deals fell through, he'd blame external factors. Market timing, competitor interference, never his own approach. Never his cultural blindness. I didn't say anything. Because I'd learned by then that Christopher didn't want input. He wanted affirmation. He wanted someone to tell him he was brilliant, that the world just hadn't caught up yet, that the next deal would be different. So I gave him that. I smiled and nodded and said, "You'll get the next one." Because that's what good wives do, right? They support, they encourage, they don't point out flaws. But inside I was keeping score. Mental notes of every time his approach cost him, every time cultural ignorance led to failure, every time he'd blame everyone except himself. And I waited, not for him to fail, but for him to finally ask me what I thought, to finally see me as someone who might have insight, who might understand things he didn't, but he never asked. Because you don't ask for advice from someone you don't think has anything valuable to say. The dinner with Mr. Tanaka had been in the works for 3 months. Tanaka Industries was one of the largest manufacturing firms in Japan. They were expanding into the US market, looking for partners. Christopher's company was on the shortlist, but so were 5 others. This dinner was Christopher's chance to stand out, to prove he understood not just business, but partnership. that he could be trusted, that he respected the way Tanaka Industries operated. Christopher prepared obsessively. He read briefing documents, studied Tanaka's company history, even hired a consultant to teach him basic Japanese phrases. Please, thank you, it's an honor to meet you. Surface-level stuff, performative, not real. I watched him practice, standing in our bedroom, looking in the mirror, repeating phrases with exaggerated pronunciation. Konnichiwa, arigato, gozaimasu. I didn't correct him, didn't tell him his pronunciation was off, didn't offer to help because he hadn't asked. The afternoon before the dinner, Christopher laid out my outfit. Black dress, elegant, expensive, simple jewelry, nothing that would distract. Just smile, he told me. Be polite. Let me handle the conversation. Mr. Tanaka is traditional. He'll appreciate that you're respectful. Quiet. I nodded. Of course. And if he speaks Japanese, just smile. He knows you don't understand. It's fine. I nodded again. Something in me wanted to correct him, to say, actually, I speak Japanese fluently, but I didn't, because I realized I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see how Christopher behaved when he thought I couldn't understand, when he thought he was safe, when he thought there were no consequences. That evening, we took a car to the restaurant. It was one of those places that didn't advertise, that you only knew about if you were supposed to know about it. Private rooms, discreet service, a place where powerful people could speak freely. We were led to a room on the 40th floor. Windows overlooking the city. Low table, cushions. Traditional Japanese setup. Christopher had requested it. To show respect, he said. But I could tell he was uncomfortable. He wasn't used to sitting on the floor, wasn't used to the formality. Mr. Tanaka arrived exactly on time. Early 60s, silver hair, impeccable suit. He moved with the kind of calm precision that comes from a lifetime of discipline. He bowed. Christopher bowed back, awkwardly, too deep, not understanding that the depth of the bow communicates hierarchy, that by bowing too deeply he was either showing excessive respect or revealing he didn't understand the protocol. I bowed appropriately, slight, respectful, equal. Mr. Tanaka's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. We sat, the meal began. Christopher made small talk, complimented the restaurant, the food, the view. Mr. Tanaka responded politely, but minimally. His answers were brief, formal, not unfriendly, but not warm. Christopher didn't notice. He was too focused on his pitch, on finding the right moment to transition from pleasantries to business. I stayed quiet, smiled when appropriate, ate slowly, observed. And I noticed something Christopher didn't. Mr. Tanaka was observing too, not just Christopher, me. The way I held my chopsticks, the way I waited for others to start before eating, the way I poured tea for others before filling my own cup. Small things, cultural things, things that showed respect or didn't. About 30 minutes into the dinner, Christopher started to relax. He'd had 2 glasses of wine, enough to feel confident, comfortable. He leaned back slightly, and then he did it. He turned to Mr. Tanaka and started speaking in Japanese. His pronunciation was decent, better than I'd expected from the practicing, but stiff, textbook, like reading from a script. He said something about being honored to be considered for partnership. Mr. Tanaka responded, also in Japanese, but slower, simpler, accommodating Christopher's obvious limitations. And Christopher, encouraged by the response, kept going. He transitioned, started talking about me, still in Japanese. He gestured toward me with his wine glass, smiled, and said, in Japanese, "She's lovely, of course, but she wouldn't understand this world." Mr. Tanaka's expression didn't change. He smiled, politely, Neutrally? Said nothing. Christopher continued, emboldened by what he thought was privacy, by what he thought was a shared language that excluded me. She hosts dinners well, looks good in photographs, knows how to smile at the right times, but business? No, that's not for her. She doesn't have the mind for it. He laughed, like it was funny, like it was charming. I handle strategy, she handles the home, it works. I felt my heart rate increase, felt my face get hot, but I kept my expression neutral, took another bite of food, chewed slowly, swallowed, took a sip of water. Like I didn't understand, like I was exactly what he said I was. Simple, decorative, oblivious. But Mr. Tanaka was watching me. I could feel it, and when I glanced up, his eyes were on me. Not Christopher. Me. And there was something in his expression, not pity, not surprise, recognition. He knew, somehow he knew. Christopher kept talking, made another joke. Something about how he'd tried to explain stock market fluctuations to me once, and I'd looked confused. How I'd asked if we could talk about something else. How he'd realized then that some people just aren't built for complex thinking. But that's fine, Christopher said, still in Japanese. Not everyone needs to be smart. Some people just need to be pleasant. And she's very pleasant. He smiled at me, affectionate, patronizing. Like I was a pet, something cute but ultimately limited. Mr. Tanaka set down his chopsticks, carefully, deliberately. He looked at Christopher, then at me, then back at Christopher, and he said, in Japanese, formal and clear, "Your wife seems very attentive." Christopher nodded. "She's well trained." He said it like a joke, but it landed wrong. Even I could see that. Mr. Tanaka's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. And then he did something I didn't expect. He turned to me, made direct eye contact, and in perfect formal complex Japanese he asked, "And you, Mrs. Isabella? What do you think of your husband's business?" The room went silent. Christopher's smile froze. He looked at Mr. Tanaka, then at me, then back at Mr. Tanaka. He laughed nervously. "She doesn't speak Japanese." Mr. Tanaka's eyes stayed on me. "No?" This was the moment. I could pretend, could smile and shrug and shake my head, could protect Christopher's ego, could maintain the charade, or I could do what I'd been preparing for without realizing it. I could speak. I set down my chopsticks, slowly, deliberately, mirroring Mr. Tanaka's earlier gesture. I met his eyes, and in clear, fluent, formal Japanese, I answered, "I think my husband is talented and ambitious, but perhaps overconfident in some of his assumptions, particularly regarding cultural communication." The silence that followed was absolute. Christopher's face went white, then red. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Mr. Tanaka's expression didn't change, but his eyes lit up, not with surprise, with satisfaction, like a teacher whose student just passed a test they didn't know they were taking. "Your Japanese is excellent," he said, still in Japanese. "Where did you study?" "Berkeley," I replied. "And then in Tokyo. I lived there for a year." "And you've been fluent for how long?" "About 10 years. Mr. Tanaka nodded slowly, picked up his tea, took a sip. Then he switched to English, looked at Christopher. "Your wife is impressive." Christopher tried to smile. It came out as a grimace. I didn't know she spoke Japanese." "Clearly," Mr. Tanaka said, and there was no warmth in his voice, no smile, just professional neutrality that somehow felt worse than anger. Christopher tried to recover. "Isabella, why didn't you—" "You never asked," I said, calmly, in English. "In 8 years, you never once asked if I spoke Japanese. But you let me sit here." "Making jokes about me," I finished. Yes.
I did. The rest of the dinner was excruciating, not explosive, just uncomfortable. Christopher tried to pivot, tried to steer the conversation back to business, but the energy had changed. Mr. Tanaka was polite, professional, but distant. He asked me questions about my studies, my time in Tokyo, my understanding of Japanese business culture, my thoughts on the challenges American companies face in Asian markets. And I answered, honestly, thoughtfully. In Japanese when appropriate. In English when not. I wasn't performing, I was just being who I'd always been. Someone who paid attention, who understood nuance, who respected others enough to learn their language, their culture, their way of seeing the world. Christopher barely spoke. He just watched, his face cycling through emotions, shock, embarrassment, anger, confusion, and finally, something that looked like fear, because he was realizing too late that he'd humiliated himself, not just by insulting me, but by revealing how little he actually knew about me, how little he'd paid attention, how much he'd underestimated me. When dessert came, Mr. Tanaka set down his spoon, looked at both of us. "Thank you for a memorable evening," he said. His tone was neutral, professional, final. He stood, bowed to me, properly, respectfully. "It was an honor to meet you, Mrs. Isabella. Your presence made this evening enlightening." I stood, bowed back. The honor was mine. He shook Christopher's hand, briefly, formally, no warmth, no promises, no indication of what would come next. And then he left. The moment the door closed, Christopher turned to me. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous.
What the hell was that? I looked at him. What was what? You speak Japanese, you're fluent, and you never told me? You never asked? That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have, I said. In 8 years of marriage, 8 years. You never once asked if I spoke other languages. You knew I studied linguistics, you knew I'd lived in Japan, you just never asked. Because I assumed. You assumed I didn't, I said. You assumed I was just like you said. Pleasant, decorative, not smart enough for complex thinking. Christopher's face flushed. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did, I said. Maybe not consciously, maybe you've convinced yourself you respect me, but tonight you said out loud what you actually think, that I'm lovely but stupid, that I'm good for hosting dinners and looking nice in photos,
that I'm well-trained. He flinched at that. I was joking. No, you were honest because you thought I couldn't understand, because you thought you were safe. So what? Christopher said, his voice rising now. You just let me sit there making a fool of myself. You let me insult you in front of the most important client I've ever had. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you stop yourself? I asked. Christopher stared at me. This is unbelievable. You sabotaged me. I didn't say a word, I said. You sabotaged yourself. I just stopped pretending I didn't understand. The car ride home was silent. Christopher drove, jaw clenched, hands tight on the wheel. I looked out the window, watched the city pass, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm, not happy, not vindicated, just calm, because I'd finally stopped performing.
Finally, stopped making myself smaller. Finally, stopped pretending I didn't notice all the ways he'd been erasing me. When we got home, Christopher went straight to his office, slammed the door. I heard him on the phone, probably calling his lawyer, his consultant, his business partner, trying to figure out how to salvage this. I didn't follow him, didn't apologize, didn't try to fix it. I walked to our bedroom, not the guest room. Our bedroom. Because I wasn't running, I wasn't making this easy for him by disappearing. If he wanted space, he could find it. I got ready for bed, washed my face, brushed my teeth, put on pajamas, climbed into bed. And I slept, actually slept, better than I had in months. The next morning, Christopher was gone before I woke up. He left a note on the kitchen counter. We needed to talk, but not now. I have meetings, I'll be late. I crumpled the note, threw it away, poured myself coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, waiting. Not for him, for myself. Trying to figure out what I wanted, what came next, because this wasn't over, this was just starting. Christopher didn't come home that night, didn't call, didn't text, just silence. I didn't reach out either. The second day, he sent a text. "Staying at a hotel, need time to think," I replied. "Okay." That's all, just okay, because I didn't owe him more than that. 3 days after the dinner, Christopher called. "Can we talk?" "Yes. I'm coming home tonight. We need to figure this out." When he arrived, he looked terrible, hadn't shaved. Clothes wrinkled, eyes red. He'd been crying, or not sleeping, or both. We sat in the living room on opposite couches, like strangers. "Tanaka rejected us," Christopher said. "They went with another firm." "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it, not for him, for the people at his company who would be affected. "Are you?" Christopher asked. "Are you really sorry? Or is this what you wanted?" "What I wanted," I said slowly, "was for you to see me, to ask me questions, to value what I know. But you couldn't do that. So no, I didn't want you to lose this deal. But I'm not surprised it happened." "Why didn't you tell me," Christopher asked, "that you spoke Japanese, that you knew about my business, that you could help? Would you have listened?" Christopher paused. "I don't know." "Exactly," I said. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what now? You want a divorce? You want to leave?" I paused, because that was the easy answer, the expected answer. And the answer everyone watching this story would expect me to give, walk away, start over, be free. But sitting there, looking at this man I'd loved for 8 years, I realized something. I didn't know what I wanted yet, and that was okay. "I don't know," I said, honestly. "I don't know if I want to leave, or if I want you to finally show up. But I know I'm done pretending, done being small, done letting you treat me like I'm lucky to be here when you've never once asked what I think about anything that matters." "I thought I knew you," Christopher said. "You didn't," I said. "You knew a version of me, the version I performed because you seemed to need it. But that's not who I am, and I can't do it anymore." "So who are you?" he asked. "I don't know if I remember." "Then maybe," I said, "you should start asking." Christopher nodded, slowly.
"Can I stay here? Tonight?" I thought about it. "Yes, but not in our room. Guest room, because we're not okay and I'm not going to pretend we are." He nodded again. "Okay." And for the first time in 3 days, he looked at me. Really looked. "I'm sorry for what I said, for how I treated you, for all of it." "I know," I said. "But sorry isn't enough. Sorry is just the start." The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. Not because Christopher was cruel, but because he was trying, actually trying. And I didn't know if that was enough. He started asking questions about my day, about my work, about the languages I spoke and why I'd studied them. At first, it felt performative, like he was checking boxes. Doing the work a therapist probably told him to do. We'd have breakfast together and he'd ask,
"What are you working on today?" And I'd tell him, and he'd listen, or seem to listen. But I couldn't tell if it was real, if he actually cared, or if he was just going through the motions because he was scared of losing me. One morning, about 3 weeks after the dinner, I was sitting at the kitchen table reading a Japanese newspaper. Christopher came in, poured coffee, looked over my shoulder. "You're reading that?" "Yes." "Can you really understand it?" "Yes." He sat down. What's it about? I looked at him. Are you actually interested? Or are you just trying to prove you're paying attention now? He flinched. Both, maybe. I'm trying, Isabella. I know I don't deserve credit for trying, but I am. I sighed, set down the paper. It's about economic relations between Japan and South Korea. There's tension over trade agreements. Huh, he paused. Do you think that affects tech exports? I blinked. Yes, actually, it does, particularly semiconductors. Huh? He said again, and then, can you explain it to me? So I did. I explained the trade tension, the historical context, the cultural factors that made negotiation complicated. And Christopher listened, actually listened, asked follow-up questions, took notes. A week later, he had a call with a potential Korean partner. I was in the other room, but I heard him reference things I'd explained, heard him navigate cultural considerations I'd taught him. The call went well, better than expected. When he hung up, he came to find me. That helped. What you told me, it actually helped? Good, I said. Thank you, he said. For teaching me. I nodded. I didn't say you're welcome, because I wasn't sure if I was welcome, if this was genuine or just another performance. But over the next few weeks, Christopher kept asking, kept learning, started running potential deals by me, not for approval, but for input, for cultural perspective, for the things he was finally realizing he'd been missing. And slowly, his business started improving. Deals that would have fallen through were salvaged. Partnerships that seemed unlikely were formed. His team noticed. His partners noticed. One of his board members asked him, "What changed? You seem so much more culturally aware now." Christopher hesitated. I was there, standing across the room at a company event. And I waited to see what he'd say. Would he take credit? Would he deflect? He looked at me, then back at his board member.
I started listening to someone who knows more than I do. The board member laughed. Oh, well, whoever it is, keep listening. But Christopher didn't laugh. He looked at me. I will. That night, we talked. Actually talked. Not surface conversation. Real conversation. I told them you've been helping me, Christopher said. Some of them. Not all, but some. And they want to meet you. Officially. They want to know if you'd consider consulting. For the company. Not under the table, actually consulting. I stared at him. You're serious? Yes. You're good at this, Isabella. You're better than good. You see things I miss, understand things I don't. I should have recognized that years ago. Let me recognize it now. This isn't just about saving your business, I asked. No, he said. I mean, yes, it helps the business.
But it's more than that. I'm realizing how much I didn't know about you, how much I didn't ask. And I want to know. I want to actually see you. Not the version I needed you to be, the actual you. That's going to take time, I said. I know. I'm not going to forgive you quickly just because you're trying now. I know. And I don't know if this marriage is fixable. I know, Christopher said. But can we try? Can you give me the chance to try? I looked at him. At this man who'd spent 5 years making me invisible, who was now finally trying to see me. Yes, I said, but not because I owe you, because I want to know if it's possible, if two people who failed each other this badly can actually learn to do better. Thank you, he said. And I saw tears in his eyes, actual tears. Don't thank me yet, I said. Show me. Consistently. There for a long time. Then maybe I'll thank you. 2 months later, Christopher called a meeting with his board. He wanted me there, officially. Not as his wife who happened to sit in, but as a consultant he was hiring. I prepared a presentation on market analysis, on cultural considerations for their Asian expansion, on mistakes they'd been making and how to correct them. I was nervous. This was different from helping Christopher behind the scenes. This was public, official. What if they dismissed me? What if they only listened because I was Christopher's wife? The meeting started. Christopher introduced me. This is Isabella Chen. Many of you know her as my wife, but what you don't know is that she's a linguist, fluent in 4 languages, including Japanese and Korean. She's been consulting with me for the past few months, and she's the reason our recent deals have been more successful. I've asked her to present today because we need her perspective, not as a favor, but because she's the best person for this work. I presented for 45 minutes on market trends, on cultural pitfalls, on communication strategies. The board listened, actually listened, asked questions, took notes. When I finished, the chairman, a man in his 70s, looked at Christopher. "Why didn't you tell us about this months ago?" Christopher didn't deflect, didn't make excuses. Because I was an idiot, and I didn't recognize what was right in front of me. The chairman turned to me. "We'd like to formalize this arrangement, if you're interested." I looked at Christopher. He nodded. Not telling me what to do, just supporting whatever I decided. "I'm interested," I said. "But I want to be clear, I'm not consulting as Christopher's wife. I'm consulting as Isabella Chen. I want my own contract, my own fee structure, my own professional relationship with this company. If you're hiring me for what I know, not because of who I'm married to." The chairman smiled. "Understood. We'll have our legal team draw up the paperwork." That night, Christopher took me to dinner, not to celebrate, just to talk. "Thank you," he said, "for today, for giving me the chance to make this right." "This isn't right yet," I said, "and this is progress." "But we're not fixed, Christopher. We're just trying." "I know." "Do you?" I asked. "Because I need you to understand something. I'm not staying because you finally gave me a job. I'm staying because I want to see if you can sustain this, if you can keep seeing me. Not just when it benefits you, but always, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means admitting you're wrong, even when it means sharing credit and space and power." "I'll mess up," Christopher said. "I know I will. I'm going to forget or fall back into old patterns, and when I do, I need you to call me on it." "I will," I said, "but I need you to understand that calling you on it isn't nagging. It's not being difficult. It's me refusing to disappear again." "I understand," he said. And then, quieter, "I'm sorry it took losing a major deal for me to see you." "Me too," I said. "But it did, and we have to live with that." 6 months after that dinner, things were different. Not perfect, but different. Christopher was in individual therapy. We were in couples counseling. Twice a week, we sat in a therapist's office and talked about patterns, about communication, about how years of dismissal don't heal overnight. Our therapist, Dr. Singh, asked hard questions. "Christopher, what did you get from keeping Isabella small?" Christopher struggled with that one. "I didn't think I was keeping her small." "But you were," Dr. Singh said. "You benefited from her being in the background." "How?" He thought about it for a long time. "It made me feel important, like I was the smart one, the capable one. If she was brilliant too, if she was contributing, then what did I bring? What made me special?" "And now?" Dr. Singh asked. "Now I realize that's incredibly insecure. That real partnership isn't about one person being more important. It's about both people being whole." Dr. Singh turned to me. "Isabella,
What did you get from staying quiet?" I didn't want to answer that, but I knew I needed to. "Safety," I said. "If I didn't challenge him, if I didn't compete, then he wouldn't leave. I thought that's what love required, making yourself smaller so the other person has room. And now? Now I know that's not love, that's fear, and I'm tired of being afraid." The therapy was hard. Some sessions we'd leave angry, not at each other, at ourselves. How much time we'd wasted, and how much damage we'd done. But we kept going. Christopher kept trying. He'd catch himself mid-sentence. "Actually, what do you think about this?" He'd introduce me differently now. "This is Isabella. She's a cultural communications consultant. She's fluent in 4 languages, and she's the reason half our Asian deals close successfully. He'd defer to me in meetings.
Not performatively, genuinely. I don't know the answer to that, but Isabella does. It felt strange at first. Being seen, being valued. Part of me kept waiting for him to revert, to go back to the old Christopher, the one who needed me quiet. But he didn't. Or when he started to, he'd catch himself. Apologize, do better. I started consulting for other companies too, not just Christopher's. I built my own client base, my own reputation. People started reaching out directly. We heard you're the person to talk to about Japanese business culture. We need someone who understands Korean negotiation styles. I had to turn down work. There was too much of it. I hired an assistant, set up a proper office, registered as an LLC. I wasn't just Christopher's wife anymore. I was Isabella Chen, consultant, expert, someone people sought out.
And that changed something in me. I stopped being afraid, stopped worrying that if Christopher left, I'd have nothing, because I had something. I had myself, my skills, my knowledge, my value, with or without him. One evening, about 8 months after the dinner, Christopher came home from work. I was at the kitchen table reviewing a contract. He sat down across from me. I got an offer today. I looked up. For what? To speak at a conference about cultural competency in international business. They want me to talk about how we turn things around after losing the Tanaka deal. I waited. And I told them no. I blinked. Why? Because it's not my story to tell, it's yours. You're the one who knows this stuff. You're the one who turned things around.
I just finally started listening. So what did you tell them? I told them they should invite you, that you're the expert, that I'm just the guy who was smart enough to finally pay attention. I set down my pen. You turned down a speaking opportunity. To give it to me? Yes. Why? Christopher looked at me. Because for 8 years, I took credit for things you did. I built my career on your invisible labor, on your hosting and organizing and supporting. And I never acknowledged it. This is me acknowledging it. You're the expert. You should be the one speaking. I didn't know what to say. This doesn't fix everything, I said finally. I know. We're still not okay. I know. But this matters, I said. This is what I needed. Not the opportunity.
The recognition that you understand what you took from me. I'm trying to give it back, Christopher said. Not because I'm noble, but because it was never mine to take. I reached across the table, took his hand. Thank you. It was the first time I'd thanked him in months, and I meant it. 2 weeks later, I spoke at the conference. It was surreal. Standing on that stage, looking out at 200 people who were there to hear what I had to say. Not because of who I was married to, but because of what I knew. I talked about language, about culture, about the mistakes American companies make in Asian markets, about how respect isn't just politeness, it's understanding. I talked about power dynamics, about how silence can mean many things, about how you can't just assume you understand someone because they smile and nod. After my talk,
people came up to me, asked questions, asked for my card, asked if I did private consulting. One woman, maybe 30, pulled me aside. Thank you for what you said about being underestimated. I've been working at my company for 5 years and they still treat me like I'm just there to take notes. I needed to hear that it's not me, that I don't have to make myself smaller. I looked at her, saw myself. Years ago. You don't, I said. And if they can't see you, find people who will, because you deserve to be seen for what you actually are, not what's convenient for them. She hugged me, thanked me, and walked away. And I hoped deeply that she'd find the courage I'd taken too long to find. Christopher was in the audience. After everyone left, he came up to the stage. "You were incredible. Thank you. I mean it. Watching you up there."
Watching people listen to you the way they should have been listening for years. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see what everyone in this room just saw in 30 minutes. Better late than never, I said. Is it though? Christopher asked. Is it better late or is it just late? I thought about that. I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. 1 year after that dinner, I got a message through LinkedIn from Mr. Tanaka. It was brief, professional. "Mrs. Isabella, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out personally. I've been following your work. Your reputation in cultural communications has grown significantly. If you're interested, I'd like to discuss potential consulting opportunities with Tanaka Industries." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I showed it to Christopher. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think you should meet with him," Christopher said. "You don't think it's weird? Working with the company I lost? I think it's proof that you earned this. That this isn't about me. It never was. It was always about you." I met with Mr. Tanaka 2 weeks later. Not at a restaurant. At his company's US office. He was exactly as I remembered. Calm, precise, respectful. "I wanted to tell you something," Mr. Tanaka said. "About that dinner." "Yes?" "I knew immediately that you understood Japanese, the way you listened, the way you held yourself. It was too attentive, too aware. I suspected you were fluent before your husband even spoke." "You did?" "Yes. I tested you because I wanted to see what you would do. Would you expose him immediately? Would you correct him? Or would you wait?" "Why did that matter?" I asked. "Because it told me about your character. Impulse is easy. Strategy is hard. You chose strategy. You waited until you were asked directly. That showed wisdom." "I didn't feel wise," I said. "I felt trapped." "Perhaps," Mr. Tanaka said. "But even in feeling trapped, you made a strategic choice. That is wisdom under pressure." We talked for 2 hours about markets, about partnerships, about the work I'd been doing. At the end, Mr. Tanaka said, "I'd like to hire you as a consultant for Tanaka Industries. We're expanding our US partnerships. We need someone who understands both cultures, not just languages, cultures." "I'm interested," I said. "But I need to know something. Is this because of that dinner? Are you trying to make a point?" "No," Mr. Tanaka said.
"I'm hiring you because you're excellent at what you do. That dinner simply revealed what was always true, that you understand things most people miss, that you see clearly, that you wait for the right moment instead of rushing. Those are valuable skills." I took the job, not full-time, consulting, part of my portfolio, but it meant something, working with the company Christopher had lost, not as revenge, but as proof, that this was about my skills, my knowledge, my value, not about him. Not anymore. Christopher was happy for me, genuinely happy. "You deserve this," he said. "All of it." "I know," I said. "Do you?" he asked. "Really no, because for a long time you didn't seem to." "I'm learning," I said, "what it feels like to be seen."
What it feels like to be valued for what I actually am instead of what I do for someone else. "And?" Christopher asked. "And it feels good. Better than good. It feels right." "I'm glad," he said. And I believed him. 2 years after that dinner, I'm still married to Christopher. I know that surprises people. The story they want is the one where I left, where I walked away and built something completely new, where I proved I didn't need him. But that's not what happened. What happened is more complicated, more honest, more real. We're still together, but we're different. We're not the couple we were. That couple is gone, dead. We had to mourn them before we could figure out who we'd be next. And some days we're still figuring it out. We still fight, still have moments where old patterns try to resurface.
Christopher still occasionally makes assumptions, still sometimes forgets to ask. And when he does, I call him on it immediately, not nicely, not with patience, directly. "You're doing it again." And he stops, apologizes, does better. I'm not perfect either. I still sometimes wait too long to speak up. Still sometimes test him by staying quiet to see if he'll ask. And he calls me on that too. "You're upset about something, tell me. Don't make me guess." We're learning, both of us, what partnership actually looks like, how to be two whole people building something together instead of one person eclipsing the other. I run my own consulting firm now. It's grown. I have 3 full-time employees, clients across 6 countries, projects I'm proud of, work that matters. Christopher is still CEO of his company, but he's different too. More careful, more culturally aware, more humble. He credits me publicly now, in interviews, in meetings. My wife taught me everything I know about cultural competence. People ask me sometimes if I regret staying, if I should have left, if I'm settling. And I understand why they ask, because the clean story is leave. Start over, find someone better, but life isn't always clean. Sometimes the brave choice isn't walking away, it's staying and demanding better. It's refusing to accept less, while also refusing to run. It's saying, "This is broken, fix it, and I'm not disappearing while you try." I stayed because I wanted to see if change was possible, if someone who'd been unconsciously cruel for years could actually wake up, could actually do the work. And the answer is complicated, yes and no. Christopher has changed significantly. He's not the man he was 2 years ago. He sees me now, values me, respects me. But does that erase 5 years of invisibility? No. Does it mean I trust him completely? No. But does it mean we're building something different? Yes. Is it enough? Some days, yes. Some days, no. I have an exit plan. I know exactly what I'd do if I left, where I'd live, how I'd support myself, what my life would look like. I think about it sometimes. Not because I'm unhappy, but because I need to know I'm staying by choice. Not because I'm trapped. Not because I'm afraid, but because I'm choosing this. Actively. Every day. And if one day I stop choosing it, if Christopher stops trying, or if I realize this was never going to work, then I'll leave. But it won't be because I gave up. It'll be because I chose myself. And there's power in that. More power than anyone realizes. The power to stay is also the power to leave. And knowing I could leave makes staying feel like strength instead of weakness. Here's what I learned from that dinner, from that moment when I had to choose between silence and speech, between exposing Christopher immediately or waiting for the right moment, between protecting his ego and protecting my truth. I learned that power isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about choosing when to use your voice, when to reveal what you know, when to let people underestimate you and when to correct them. I learned that marriage is complicated, that love doesn't always look like the movies, that sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving someone who hurt you, it's staying with them while they learn to do better, it's holding them accountable. It's refusing to let them off the hook. It's demanding they see you even when it's uncomfortable. I learned that being seen isn't something someone gives you. It's something you claim. You stop performing. Stop shrinking. Stop waiting for permission. You speak. You take up space. You demand recognition. And if people can't handle that, that's their problem, not yours. I learned that there's no one right answer. No perfect response. No guaranteed outcome. You make choices with incomplete information and you live with the consequences. And sometimes those consequences are messy and complicated and uncertain. And that's okay because life is messy. Relationships are messy. Growth is messy. And pretending otherwise doesn't make it less true. It just makes you less honest. Do I recommend what I did, staying when everyone expected me to leave? I don't know. It depends on who you are, on who your partner is, on whether they're actually trying or just performing contrition until you forgive them and things go back to normal, on whether you're staying because you want to or because you're afraid to leave, on whether you have the resources and support to leave if you need to. There's no universal answer, only personal ones. What I do know is this: you deserve to be seen, really seen for who you are, not who someone needs you to be. And if you're not being seen, you have choices. You can leave, you can demand better, you can stay and see if things change, but whatever you choose, choose it actively, consciously. Don't just drift, don't just accept, don't just hope things will magically improve. Make a choice, act on it. And if it doesn't work, make a different choice. That's not failure, that's life. 3 years after that dinner, Christopher and I were having breakfast, reading the news, drinking coffee, normal morning, and he said something that stopped me. I read an article about you yesterday. I looked up. What article? Business magazine. They were profiling successful consultants in international business. You were one of them. I didn't know they published it yet. They did. And they called you one of the top cultural communications experts in the field. That's nice, I said. It's more than nice, Christopher said. 3 years ago, no one knew your name. Now you're being profiled in major magazines. You built that, not me, you. With your help, I said. No, Christopher corrected, with your skills. I just finally stopped getting in the way. I smiled.
That's progress. Is it enough? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. But it's something. He nodded. We went back to our coffee, our papers, our morning. And it occurred to me that this was what I'd always wanted. Not grand gestures, not constant validation, just this, being seen, being valued, being partners. It wasn't perfect, we weren't healed. But we were trying. And for now, that was enough. So what would you have done at that table? Would you have spoken immediately the moment your husband insulted you? Or would you have waited like I did until someone actually asked your opinion? There's no right answer, only honest ones. Some people would have walked out, some would have confronted him immediately, some would have stayed silent forever. I chose something in between, and I'm still figuring out if it was right.
Here's what I want you to think about. This story isn't just about language, it's about being seen. About what happens when someone you love stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as a function. And about what it takes to make them see you again. If you're in a relationship right now, ask yourself, does your partner know you? Really know you? Do they ask about your thoughts, your work, your dreams? Do they introduce you as a whole person? Or just as their relationship to you? Do they value what you know or just what you do for them? These aren't small questions. They're everything, because you can't build a real partnership with someone who doesn't see you. You can build a performance, transaction, a comfortable arrangement, but not a partnership. And if you're not being seen, you have choices. You don't have to accept it.
You don't have to stay small. You don't have to wait years like I did, hoping someone would finally ask. You can speak. Now, today, you can say, I need you to see me. I need you to value me. I need this to change. And if they can't do that, if they refuse, if they make you feel like you're being difficult for wanting to be seen, then you know it's not about you. It's about them. And you can make different choices. I stayed. You might not, and that's okay. What matters is that you choose actively, consciously, not out of fear, not out of habit, but because you looked at your options and decided this is what I want. This is what serves me. This is what allows me to be fully myself. That's the lesson. Not that you should stay or leave, but that you should know yourself well enough to know what you need.
And I'm brave enough to demand it. Share this story if it resonated. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever stayed quiet when you wanted to speak, If you've ever realized that the person next to you doesn't actually see you. If you've ever had to decide whether revealing yourself would free you or cost you everything you've built. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done? What would you do? And if you're in a situation where you're invisible, where you're underestimated, where you're waiting for someone to finally ask what you think, this is me asking. What do you think? What do you know? What have you been waiting to say? Say it, not to prove someone wrong, but because you deserve to exist fully, because your voice matters, because you matter. Thank you for watching. And remember, being seen isn't something someone gives you, it's something you claim. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, but always deliberately. Never confuse silence with ignorance. And never underestimate the person who's listening, because they might understand everything, and they might just be waiting for the right moment to let you know.